Welcome, everyone, to Friday Fellowship Live. For those of you who might be new today, my name is April Hardwick, and my husband Mark and I serve the faith mission in a little town in Northern Ontario. As always, you can find out more about the mission and get to know us a little better on our website or by contacting our head office. If there's anything that you think that we could do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm going to be joined in a few minutes by Laura Ann Drake, who actually grew up in Northern Ontario and is now serving in Napanee in Eastern Ontario, which is interesting because I grew up in Eastern Ontario and I'm now in Northern Ontario. So we've kind of switched spots. But you can let us know in the comments today where you're listening from. We love to know who's tuning in, who's joining us, and where they're listening from. So feel free to do that. As well, if you watch today and you think of someone else that could benefit from this broadcast, please don't hesitate to share it with them. So be sure those likes and comments definitely help us to get these broadcasts out there, and we sure appreciate that. So be sure to leave us a comment, let us know who you are and where you're from, how you found us, and then again, to just share this with whoever you think could be benefiting from the message today. That's why we do these, to facilitate fellowship within the body of Christ during these very strange times. So this weekend, as you probably know, is Mother's Day. And if you don't know, this is your warning. As I thought about what I wanted to do for this edition of Friday Fellowship, I knew that for some women in the church, this is actually a really difficult Sunday. And it comes with a lot of complicated emotions. And it's actually not just this particular holiday, but really a lot of holidays that we celebrate in society and as the church can be difficult for those people sitting beside us in church. And I think it's something that we don't maybe talk a lot about, or maybe even we don't think a lot about. But I think it's important that if we're going to love people well as the body of Christ, that we consider other people's feelings. And so I was really excited to have Laura Ann agree to join me and have this conversation today, because we've had some really great conversations over the years surrounding this topic. So I think Laura Ann is there, and I'm going to bring her on now. There she is.
Hi, everyone.
So I think you and I both agree that one of the groups of people that are particularly overlooked in our churches today is single adults. And I was excited to have you on today to have a chat about how we could be better serving single men and women in our churches. And obviously, we don't want this to be an indictment against churches or pastors. That's not our goal here today. We just want to be able to offer some tips and insights on how to make sure that everyone in the body feels included and loved. I think we both have that goal today. Yeah.
Yes, all right. Yes, definitely.
Before we get started today, Laura Ann, for those people who have never met you before, why don't you share a little bit about yourself, where you are, what you're doing, that sort of thing.
Okay. My name's Laura Ann Drake. I live in Napanee, Ontario. I serve with Faith Mission in Canada. I've been with the mission for almost 10 years.
Anniversary.
Well, October, I guess, technically.
All right.
Anniversary. I work with mostly kids and youth in the area in small churches, which I absolutely adore. A lot of the kids and teens that come across my path a lot of them are from non-church backgrounds, so it's amazing to be able to teach them basic Bible things and really show them who Christ is for the first time. I have a cat. Her name is Elsa. She's really cute. Yes. And yes, it's like Elsa from Frozen, just in case anybody's wondering. Sometimes get that question. I've got a cat. I don't normally tell people this. It's not like one of the first things I tell people when somebody says, tell me about yourself. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to say that I'm single. I'm 32 and I've been single my whole life. So I believe I'm well versed to be able to talk about this subject.
Absolutely.
And having, been a part of a couple different churches. I have many single friends who have actually, some of them have given me thoughts and ideas for today as well. I've asked them the questions that April's asked me. So this is more than just my personal experience and thoughts. Some of these come from friends. So
Right. Perfect. So you grew up in a church, you served in a lot of churches, as you said. And in a normal year, I know because you work for the mission, you're in a number of different churches. And as you said, you've gathered thoughts from your friends as well, right? From your single friends. So let's start with some positives. What have you seen or heard churches doing well when it comes to serving single people?
Some things that I've seen done really well is actual biblical teaching on singleness from the pulpit. Like not just teaching about marriage and kids, but actually, teaching about how, Christ said himself, it's actually, if you can accept the teaching that singleness is better, do it. Like be single yourself, like in Matthew 9:13-11, right? He talks about if you can accept this teaching, go for it, basically. I'm going to put it in layman's terms. Or 1 Corinthians 7, right, where Paul answers questions about marriage, and he says, hey, you guys should be, like, if you could be single like me, that would be amazing, because there's a lot of advantages to being single, like being able to serve, like, do more stuff in the church, like be a part of more ministries, that kind of thing. Whereas, like, I've watched my friends who are married or talk to my friends who are married in ministry, and it's so much harder for them to, balance their time between life and kids and the ministry that they are a part of. Whereas I don't have to worry about those kinds of things. So I can just be a part of it and come home at the end of the day and feed my cat instead of, coming home and feeding my children and asking my husband, like, what happened during the day, and, put my time and effort into, like, them. I have more time and effort to put into Christ and just serving in the church, which has been awesome. Inclusive application from the pulpit is I've seen it done well. Not just making all the applications from your sermon about having kids, or relating to your kids or your spouse, but like talking about, like, so you're single, like this could be work for you, or like applications towards like work and different things like that include everyone in the congregation, regardless of marital status. Remembering and acknowledging them on holidays is definitely something that I have seen done well. I've seen it completely absent in some churches, but I've seen it done well. Just acknowledging, like, say Mother's Day, for instance, like, it's hard for women who struggle with infertility. So not just people who are single, but women who struggle with infertility. Like, I want to acknowledge them too, because I think it's really important that on Mother's Day, we acknowledge that, and we acknowledge your struggle, and we're with you. And
that's it. Like, we're having the conversation today just surrounding single people, but I think in a broader context, that is sort of my broader goal, is to make people aware that, like, these holidays can be painful for a lot of different groups, right?
Yeah. And especially like in the single way, it's hard because you watch you watch your friends with their kids running around, and you love them, you love their kids. Like, there's, but it's hard to watch that sometimes. I've seen, it's really hard to watch that sometimes. I've seen done well is like treating single adults, whether they're 21 or 41 and single, never married or widowed or divorced or whatever, treating them as full-fledged adults, giving them responsibilities in the church. Like, I have some friends who are in full-time ministry who are single, like pastors and things like that. Acknowledging that they are full and complete human beings.
Yes.
Because God, that's the way God has made us, Jesus,
and they're not youth, right?
And not youth, leading churches and like hospitality ministries and like worship and different things like that, I think we have a tendency to shove single people in youth and kids ministry, which is fine. Absolutely. I love that. I think I'm great with that.
But not everyone does, right?
But not everybody does. Some people just are not cut out to lead children's and youth ministry, and that's okay. You don't have to. Like, God has given everybody different gifts and talents.
And I think recognizing, like, I actually read a really good just blog post from a woman who had the board come. She was on the board and she had the board come to her house and she served them dinner. And a board member made a comment to her that, oh, you know, when I was single, I would have just served us all pizza. And she was like, well, I'm 43, so I thought I'd cook dinner, you know, like,
Yeah.
but she said, if I was in my 20s, I probably would have, but recognizing that I'm a single adult, but I'm a single adult with a home and, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like I would say eating right as a single person can be really hard because you don't have
Yes,
the
absolutely.
motivation. Like some days, like if I'm completely honest, some days I have a bagel with broiled cheese on it every day for like
Yeah.
3 meals, right? It's hard
Sometimes we
to
have
have
that too, Lorianne, I'll be honest.
but just inviting someone to be an honorary member of your family, like
Yeah.
my personal experience with that, I have some friends who've had amazing personal experiences with that. And my personal experience is like one time I was invited, I see this couple on a regular basis too, and like the family, they invited me into their home. We sat and they finished cooking dinner and then we sat at the table and they just had like a normal night. Like
Yeah.
they passed around vitamin C, like that they do
Yeah.
every day, and like read your family devotion. And
Yeah.
then one of the kids likes making escape rooms, so we did an escape room to test it for like her friends and things like that, just like
Right.
normal everyday life stuff. Having a single person over does not have to be weird or awkward. I think that's a misconception, that having a single person, especially if they're not in university, over for dinner is weird and awkward. It's like, no, it doesn't have to be. Like,
no,
you want to have me over and then fold your laundry like you do every day after supper after you put your kids to bed? Sure, I'll help you fold laundry. I don't care. Like, it's better than sitting at home alone with my cat. Like,
yes. Yeah, that's it, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to cut you off. Do you have any other things that you want to share? Okay, so those are, like, I think those are all things that maybe people don't think about, you know, like especially including somebody and even with the restrictions, we're allowed, right? We're allowed to have a single person is allowed to bubble with a family, right? That's still, and I think that's particularly important right now, to think of that, you know, like, it's a very different situation for somebody who's single. Like, yes, sometimes I get sick of my family, but you know, single people don't have people to get sick of. So let's give them some people to get sick of, you know?
Yes, please.
So those are awesome ideas. And I think things that people can keep in their minds, but I'm sure that yourself and your friends have also seen the flip side. So without singling out a specific church or a specific situation, what have you seen that could have been handled better or with more compassion? Like maybe something that the church thought was going to be super helpful, but it actually ended up causing hurt feelings.
I would say, like, people making jokes about your singleness, right? Like, for instance, if you're at a wedding and maybe there's someone else from your church there or another Christian that you know from some other sphere of life, and they're like, don't worry, you're next. It's like, no, you don't know that. You don't know what God has called me to do. You don't know if God has actually called me to be single for the rest of my life, right? Like, you don't know that. You're not God. You can't speak to that. And like, don't worry, your singleness won't last forever. Or like, you've got to put yourself out there. Like, advice from people that you don't know well is not helpful.
Right. Like, and they think they're being helpful, right?
Yeah,
they think they're,
100%. Like, I totally recognize that sometimes people think that they're being helpful, but in reality, they're not. And they're causing hurt feelings. When you make comments like that, it like makes you feel like there's something wrong with you. Definitely my personal experience and some of my friends, like, it makes you feel like there's something wrong with you, or that singleness is not okay. It's not, like, you can't be a fulfilled person being single. Like, you know, you're not complete unless you have a spouse and kids, or at least, you know, a spouse. And, you know, or like just commenting on your life. Like, this is something that a friend of mine said, like, they sit next to somebody at church, like of the opposite sex, and people are like, oh, so like, is there something going on? Like,
Yeah.
and you could just be friends. Like like
Yeah.
our love lives or lack thereof are not for your entertainment. They're not for your
Yeah.
entertainment. They're not for you to fix. If I have invited you into that part of my life, like if you know me well and I've invited you into that part of my life, then you can be like, hey, I know this guy. Like, I think you might hit it off. Like, could I give him your number or something? Or like, you guys meet up for coffee, or can I have you both over for dinner?
Yeah.
And that's helpful and nice if you know that person well that you're talking to, and they have given you permission to do that.
Yeah.
Right. If they have not given you permission to do that, like don't even ask.
Yeah. And would you say that's a conversation, like in my experience, that's a conversation that single people have welcomed, whether or not they welcome the me introducing them to someone or not, they welcome the conversation about it, because it gives them an opportunity to say, oh yeah, I'd love that, or no, thank you, that's not something I'm interested in. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're like, if it's coming from a friend, someone who's taken the time to get to know us.
Yeah.
That's a perfectly acceptable conversation to have.
Yeah.
And I welcome that, because you're asking me what I want.
Yeah.
Not telling me what I think I should want, but you're asking. Like,
and that's a big difference.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So, yeah. I do think that's particularly important, that as we invite people into our circle of friends and become friends with them, that we make sure that we don't just assume that everyone is, well, you're my friend, so I thought you'd be interested in that because this person's my friend too, and know, maybe that's not even what God has for that person, and they already know that, so you're just causing awkwardness and tension where there doesn't need to be. Yeah.
But always ask before you try.
Yes, always ask.
Always ask.
Absolutely. So obviously, as we have this conversation, we don't want people to stop celebrating things. That's that's not our goal. But how do you think we can be better at celebrating these, whether it's Mother's Day, Father's Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, celebrating these things while still making sure that people feel understood?
Definitely. So if we're talking specifically towards Mother's Day at the moment.
Yeah,
I have other thoughts, but let's speak towards that.
Yeah, it's this weekend. So
yeah. I think, as I said earlier, like acknowledging the person's struggle.
Yeah.
Whether it's with infertility, or I'll say this. So for myself, I'm childless by choice and circumstance. Right. Like, I'm not married. So I'm not having kids. Like, that's my choice, right? And circumstance, like I'm single, so I'm not having children. Like, there's ways you can go about it. But like, I'm choosing no. So acknowledging that, like our primary family unit is not like mom, dad, kids, right? Our primary family unit as believers is the church.
Yes.
Okay, so it's the church. So I might not physically have children, but I have spiritual children. Right?
Yeah,
God
absolutely.
has called us to one generation to I think it was it's in the Psalms. I can't remember which one at the moment, but to declare what God has done from one generation to the next. Right? Yeah. Having kids is something that I desire, but I'm going to be personal here for a sec.
Yeah, that's okay.
But as I was kind of dealing with this situation and talking to God about it, God actually gave me some verses from Isaiah, and it's sorry,
that's okay.
It's Isaiah, and what chapter here? It's 50. I believe it's 57 anyway. He says in verse 3, "Don't let foreigners who commit themselves to the Lord say, 'The Lord will never let me be part of his people.' And don't let the eunuch say, 'I am dried up tree with no children and no future.' For this is what the Lord says, I will bless those eunuchs who keep my Sabbath days holy and who choose to do what pleases me and commit their lives to me. I will give them within the walls of my house a memorial and a name far greater than sons and daughters could give. For the name I have given them is an everlasting one. It will not disappear. So I might not physically have children, but I'm in full-time ministry, and I have kids and teens that come through my life all the time that do not have a parent to teach them about Jesus. Yeah. And so the Bible says, well, this is my tablet, but this is the Bible. The Bible says that as a single person, right, it talks about eunuchs, like, but Jesus talks about how some are eunuchs by choice, like they're choosing to be celibate. Yes. And some are made that way by men or like biology or whatever. I have a monument in heaven with my name on it. Yeah. Right. And God says it's better than having physical sons and daughters. So I have to believe that. If I am a Christian and I believe the Bible, I have to go back there and say, God says it, so it has to be true. And choose every day to trust that. So that's something that God has given me, and maybe it could be an encouragement to you.
Absolutely. What a great encouragement for Mother's Day, I think, in particular, or Father's Day in particular, you know, to someone who that is their desire, which I think is a desire of a lot of, I mean, I do know that there are single people who desire singleness and not to have children, but I know that's probably not, let's say, the norm necessarily. So yeah, it would incredible encouragement for people who do desire that, you know, like, and a great reminder.
Because you, like, I might be in full-time ministry, but a lot of people aren't, and that's okay. But like the kids that come into your life, and Titus 2 talks about, you know, older women teaching younger women. Yeah. You know, like I believe it was Matt Chandler that says like as, you know, a single 22-year-old or whatever, your kid, like the teenagers think you're awesome. Yeah. So like, why can't you have them over for like pizza and a movie? You know what I mean? Like, you know, like. You might not think you're awesome, but they do. And I remember as a teenager, like, I'm going to use Deborah as an example. Sure. I she won't mind. But like, I thought Deborah was amazing. Deborah's another faith mission worker who works in Quebec with her husband. But Deborah was amazing to me, and I looked up to her so much. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what happens in your church. And so as a 42-year-old who's single, for example, whether man or woman, like, adopt some younger people of the same sex and just do life with them. Like, we often think of mentorship as like, you have to like get a book or sit down and study a book of the Bible. Like, mentorship is so much more than that. Like, it's just, if you can say the phrase, doing life together, like hanging out, talking, going, sorry. That's okay. It's like, it's awkward enough, and then you're on the internet. Anyway. Like hanging out, and those conversations that can shape your life and their life happen naturally as you just hang out and like garden or throw a ball around or whatever.
You gain that permission to speak into their lives then, right? You're not just somebody coming alongside once or twice. And I think like there's so many, you know, you said you're in full-time ministry, but there's so many opportunities for people who aren't. Like, I don't want people to think that that's you know, a barrier. I have single friends who found ways to speak into so many children's lives in so many different ways. And they have full-time jobs, you know, like I think the opportunities are definitely out there. So yeah. And you have to look for them. You have to look for them and be intentional for sure. For another thing for holidays, is like, again, acknowledging what their struggle might be, just saying, I'm here for you. I grieve with you. Again, invite singles into your home for celebrations. Like, maybe your kids have someone in their lives who they think of as a mom or a dad, you know, or an auntie or uncle that technically like is not biologically an aunt or uncle, but your kids see them that way. Have them over for a Mother's Day lunch and acknowledging them, write them cards, you know, give them a little gift. It could just like literally be a chocolate bar or like a finger painting. Like just the fact that you spend time on me is exciting. Yeah. And that you're acknowledging that role that I've played in your life. Yeah. That's it. You know, having a little Christmas with them. Again, it could be dollar store exchange, but like, it's fun. Yeah. You know? It's something, right? And it's letting them know that they're thought of by your family. right?
Yeah.
They're part of your family.
Exactly.
You know, like it's not just an afterthought. They're part of your family.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah. So, are there any? I know we've touched on a few of these already, but I think there's probably more. Are there any misconceptions that you feel that the church or the body of Christ in particular has about being single?
Yes. I think maybe without knowing it, I want to talk about this, but without knowing it, we've made an idol of marriage.
Oh yeah,
like we've totally made an idol of it. Like that is like marriage, kids is like the pinnacle of like Christendom or something within the church, and I like that's not biblical at all.
No.
Like as we talked about, like as a believer, our primary family unit is the church.
Yes.
That is where we're supposed to be, you know, loving and encouraging. And like, I'm not saying the nuclear family isn't important. It definitely is.
No, absolutely not. But the chief end of man is to glorify God. And we can do that in a marriage or single, right? Like that's not, the chief end is not marriage.
Yes. Yes. It's not marriage.
Yeah.
I think we talked a little bit about this the other day, but we've talked like, I believe it was David Platt that said this. Like, we treat singleness like it's some kind of disease, and so we've written books on that. And marriage is the solution. But as soon as you get married, they're like, here's a whole new set of problems. Here's a whole new set of books to help you, you know, navigate this. And it's like what? Like it doesn't make sense. It's like it's kind of like almost an oxymoron or something. Like logically think about this. Like if I'm single and I have to get married to be fulfilled, then I have all of these like random problems in marriage that I'm going to have to figure out how to do. But if I, as a single person, spend my time really working on my relationship with God, a lot of the things that could be problems in marriage might not be, because I've learned love, I've learned grace, I've learned forgiveness and unselfishness and those kinds of things that you need, I've been told, in marriage all the time. Or like even if you live with a roommate, you know that like there's gonna be things that they do that annoy you to no end. You have to just like in love and grace be like, okay, I have an issue with leaving cupboard doors open, and I know that has like driven some of my coworkers mad. But it's like just extend love and grace and be like, close the door and be like, I'm not perfect or whatever, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people think that you have to be married to have a meaningful life in ministry. That is a lie. You can have a meaningful life in ministry as a single person, for sure. I remember, I don't remember if they told me directly or I overheard the conversation, where someone I knew, he was in ministry, like single for like a long period of time and got married in their 30s or around there anyway. And someone said to her, they're like, oh, now you can have a meaningful ministry. Like, it's like just the way they said it was like, now that you're married, your ministry can mean so much more. And it's like, did you just like negate the last 10 years of my life? Right? Like, no, Jesus was single and he had a very important ministry. Right? He was fully God, fully human. So if that's true, then being a single adult means you're complete and you can do ministry well and to how God wants you to do it, and that's how God's called you to do it. There's different like things that a ministry that a married person with kids can have that a single person can't have, and that's fine, but the church needs all of us. We talked a little bit, and like actually I'll just read what a friend of mine said here. They said, our primary family is the church. This eradicated the tribal / clan identity when he said that his mother and siblings were outside. He said that those were that his family were those who did God's will. That's in Mark 35:33, 31 to 35. Jesus said you must hate your family in comparison for your mother. This doesn't mean you disdain your family or spousal/parental responsibilities, but it does mean we need to see everyone in the church as those who are called to love, as those we are called to love and care for, not just those who share our blood and DNA. So,
Yeah.
we talked a little bit about not every single person has a desire to be married. There are legit reasons why people might not want to be married, right? Like they truly believe God is
and
called
I think
them to
that's a
singleness.
definite misconception, right? Like we have
100%.
this thought that everyone wants to get married. No. Yeah.
No, I'd say that's probably would be for 95% of the people, but some people have legitimate reasons why they don't want to or can't. So like you got to respect that. If there's a lot of like love and respect that has to happen with that.
I'm having some technical difficulties on my end for sure. But I think I'm not getting any comments from people that they are. So I think it's just me. So if I all of a sudden drop off, join Tim next week. And I only had one last question for you anyway. So, but yeah, my screen keeps going black, but as I checked comments and stuff, it doesn't, I think it's completely just my computer and my internet here at the church. So I think you're being heard loud and clear. So that's great. But my last question for you, and then if I somehow don't end up here, join Tim next week. But what would you say to other single people? Because I know there are people who struggle with church life. They struggle with being in a church and not feeling like they're seen or understood or heard. What would you say to those people who they're struggling with church and they just don't feel like they fit in?
Okay, I'll read two of my friends' responses, and then I'll read my responses.
Perfect.
Okay, so this person says, you are important. Both family life and celibacy are paths God offers to help us grow in sanctification. Neither path is easy. Yeah. The grass always seems greener on the other side. The amount of married people who told me as a single that my life was easy while I was jealous of their life, which seems ironic to someone who's on the side of singleness. But
yes,
part of that I think is just the idol that we've made of marriage and how church sometimes makes us feel like we're not complete without it. We need to embrace the hard and the difficult as an opportunity to grow in God's grace and be thankful for the present situation in which we find ourselves. Be patient with your church. It's imperfect and full of sin as always. Become a gracious and loving voice in your church for change and for better, including singles. I do think that sometimes as a single, it's easy to crumble, but we have to know that there's love and grace on both sides.
Right. Yeah.
And be open to having those conversations in order to include those.
Because we're not going to always get it right.
Yeah, exactly. We're not always going to get it right. And then another friend, like, we're not always going to get it right. But if we're open to have that conversation, I think that's the first step in extending love and grace both ways and understanding our church family as a whole. I read a little bit of an article by the Gospel Coalition. It says 35% of people in churches in Britain are single. So that's a large percent.
Wow.
And I mean, that's Britain, but I'm sure that's true of the church in North America.
I'm sure there's not much difference. Yeah.
Okay, so this is what another friend has to say. You do fit in the family of believers. When Tim Keller was talking about ministry, broken people, and specifically sinful people in the church, he said, I guess I believe this. I believe the doctrine of sin, but I didn't expect it to be so offensive. I like this quote because it's true. We expect believers to act like Jesus, but sometimes they don't. I'm truly sorry, and I get it. I know I've had to really be intentional with seeking out community, including dating life, friends, mentors, mentees, intergenerational relationships. So don't give up. That's been my experience too. There's this weird place where like especially single people as they get older. Like if you're in like high school or like university, that seems perfectly culturally acceptable within the church to be
Right.
single.
Yeah.
But as you get older, it
Yeah.
becomes weirder and like you don't fit. Like it's hard to find a place to fit. Like I don't fit in like, you know, the university, college, and careers. I'm 32. I'm over that stage of my life. You know,
Yeah.
and we do gravitate towards people who are in the same same circumstances of life. And I believe we need those relationships,
Yeah.
but we're doing ourselves and the church a disservice by not trying to have relationships with people in different sectors of life, different areas of life. They, you know, they have a lot to offer us, and we have a lot to offer them too. Like so, you know, it's a real like relationship that can happen. And I've had to be really intentional. Like sometimes my church is the church I go to now is a little bit bigger. So I had to join a life group. And then from there, I made friendships. Right.
Right.
And now I have this couple that invites me over and different things like that.
Can you, can you talk a little bit when you say you made friendships? Give us an example of like, how do you make friendships?
How you make friendships?
People struggle with that, right? They start as adults. I struggle with that as a married woman. How do I, you know, it's not like I can go to a park when I was 5 and everyone's my best friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So a friendship starts with conversation, right? Have a conversation with someone. I know it can be scary and it's difficult to talk to new people, but just like there's this amazing invention called the internet, and you can Google conversation starters. So like, and I've totally done it. Like whether it's like talking to someone online or in person, like I've Googled conversation starters. I have a few go to, but like if you see someone at church and you're like, oh, they might be nice, or it's like after church and you're like, I have to talk to somebody, otherwise I look like I'm a weirdo or something like that. Just go up to them and ask them, hey, I'm Laura Ann. How long have you been coming to the church? Right? That's something in common you have right away.
You're both in the church building.
Yeah. We're both in the church. So like we automatically have something to talk about, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which I know it's totally awkward, and it's a skill that I've had to learn as an introvert. I've had to learn how to talk to people, but the best way to do it is just practice it. Have some of those conversation starters in the back of your brain. Like a good one, if you're trying to find out things to talk about with somebody, a good one is like, what does the perfect day look like for you? Or what do you do in your spare time? Because they'll tell you a lot about themselves in that question. So if they say like, what is the perfect day for you? As a married woman, you might say a day without my kids and husband where I can like read a book, watch my favorite show, right? And then you're like, boom, they've got kids, they've got a husband, that's things to talk about that we can like interact over. Or they might say, they might talk about the book that you're reading at the moment. So you're like, oh, I like to read too. So you have that in common, or you might have the same favorite TV show or something. And that tells you a lot about the person and also helps you avoid like hard, like weird subjects. Like, so are you married? Like, you basically told me you're married.
It just comes out more naturally, right? It's a more natural. Yeah.
More natural. So it's, so be intentional with that. Sometimes for making friendships, like if something's happening at the church or you hear of somebody who's like having a bonfire, like just show up, practice some conversation, show people that you're not going anywhere. In my experience, there's a group of people that have grown up together. And so I basically just had to show them that I wasn't going anywhere, and intentionally ask, like, while they're talking about something that happened when they were teenagers, just be like, so I don't know that story. What happened? And then they're like, oh yeah, like you've been around for, 6 months, but you don't really know much about our lives, or you haven't been in those
that's
things.
it.
So it's about,
because I don't think most people, for the most part, are intentionally excluding, right? Especially in that situation where you're coming into a situation where all these people have grown up together. They're not intentionally leaving you out of things. It's just, unless you're reminding them you exist, they might not think about it,
Exactly. So it's, and like that's a hard fact where you have to extend a little bit of love and grace too. And realize the times in your life when you've maybe done the same thing, and just be intentional. Like, you have to work
Yeah.
for it. I can't speak to being married and having married friends, but I'm sure you have to work at having
Oh
relationships
yeah,
with other married
absolutely.
people.
And one thing that I did do, like with a couple of single friends in my life, because my life I can get self-focused. I think we all can get
Oh
self-focused,
yeah,
but I go home to 6 kids, my husband, and I can think about that all the time. And so I have said, like, I want to think about you. Please don't feel like you're bothering me, or like, remind me, hey, I haven't heard from you this week. How are you doing? Like, and that reminds me, oh yeah, I like you. you know I want to build that friendship with you too. You have my
yeah,
permission to remind me you exist. That sounds awful, but I can get caught up in day-to-day things and forget that I want friends too, like, and so
yeah,
I think you're not being a bother. I can, speaking as a married person, it's a different friendship than a group of single people, but you're not bothering to remind us that, hey, we like each other, like,
yeah,
and I want to include you. I want to be having you over for supper and things like that. It's just that sometimes if I don't write it down, it's gone. so
yeah.
so don't be afraid to remind people
Mm-hmm.
that, hey, I go to your church.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
yeah.
I just want
Yeah.
to speak to one thing that I haven't said, but it's running in the back of my
Yeah,
brain.
please
Um,
do.
we talked about, like, you know, Mother's Day being difficult for women who aren't mothers. Like, I know someone
Mhm.
who's older biologically, was never able to have kids, and so when they go
Right.
to church and they automatically hand them a flower, assuming that they're a mom, and they
Yes.
find out they're not a mom. It's like they see shock on people's faces, and sometimes have rude comments of like, why not? Or, her mom is like, people say like, oh, why don't you have grandkids? That kind of thing. So
Right.
including
Yeah.
them in the spiritual mother thing and being like, here's a flower for all women that day. Like, I've seen that done really well. It's like,
Yes.
though you do not have
Yeah,
a
me
husband and you
too.
do not have biological children or adopted children, you're a mom to the kids in these church or the younger women in these church. In a way, here's a flower for
Yeah.
you. So that
Yeah.
is something that needs to happen. I've had
Yeah.
conversations with people who like are shocked about, marital status or no kids or whatever. Do your best to hide that if you are feeling that way. Like, don't let it
Yes.
come on your face, right? You can be shocked in your brain, but like,
Yes.
try to keep your facial expression as neutral as possible.
Neutral.
Yeah, neutral. And instead of like
Yeah.
asking them why not, maybe just let the conversation
Yeah.
drop. You know what I mean? Don't make things more awkward
Yeah.
for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Change the subject.
Change the subject. Yes.
Unless they keep talking about it, that's a
Yeah.
different thing. But I think,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like, if they keep
I've
talking
seen
to you about
that
it, you're
surprise you, and
good.
I do think you're right. Yeah, exactly. I think you're right that you're in a certain demographic that where you're 32, so people assume things, but then as you become that much older, people assume that maybe you're widowed and your grandkids just aren't at church, your kids just aren't at church, and so
Yeah.
there's a different set of assumptions that happen,
Mm.
and I think that's a good. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I would say, so we're going to go back to what I would say to single people. I would say, like, you do matter.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
are a complete person. Don't let anybody ever make you feel otherwise. If somebody is being a jerk about it, like they won't let it go, that's on them. That's not on
Yeah.
you, right? That's
Yeah.
something that they need. You don't be a jerk back to them, but you have
Yeah.
every right. Like, you have every right to walk away from that conversation, or to like
Yeah.
respectfully even like come back with like Bible truths. Because if we're Christians, we should be able to challenge each other with the Bible, right? The
Yes.
truth of God's word. And you can quote things like, where Paul talks about how singleness is good and he wishes people were single like him, you know, and just maybe somebody is
Mhm.
completely, maybe they're Bible illiterate or something like that, you
Yeah.
know, and they don't know, because we've created this culture around like marriage and kids. So
Yes.
you have respectfully, though, not like in your face, but like respectfully say, hey, have you ever considered what Paul said here? like, what do you think that means? Or like, how does that relate to the church today? Right? Like having that, being open to have that conversation with them. But if they're still being a jerk, like you have every right to walk away.
Yeah.
Don't let
you need
people
to have boundaries, right?
Oh yeah.
With people like that. Yeah.
Yeah. You need to have boundaries. Yeah. So you matter. You are a complete whole person. Don't let anybody make you feel otherwise. Mm-hmm. When you're having a bad day, go back to scripture and choose. It's really hard. I still struggle with this all the time. Choose to trust what God says. Like choose to believe that, and then distract yourself. And if you have things in your life that like make you go down the rabbit hole of like, I'm single, I'm childless, pity party kind of thing, avoid those. Like for me, it's Hallmark movies. So don't watch too many Hallmark movies, right? Like protect yourself too, right? Like protect yourself too. And practice. I read this book called Did I Kiss Marriage Goodbye by Carolyn McCulley back when I was a young person. And it was just really good advice about how to be a Christian, like how to be a Christian woman. So I would recommend that book. And also like, don't sit around. So I would recommend that book, and work on your relationship with God and how God wants you, like grow the fruit of the Spirit in your life. We'll say that. Put yourself in situations where you're doing that. Don't let the selfishness like overwhelm your life. Like I see myself really selfish with my time, if I'm honest. Like I'm like, I don't want to do that. Or like, I got another email asking me to serve on Mother's Day so that mothers can spend time with their families. Like that's the situation that happened.
But I do think that's something that as the church we do. I was going to say, I do think that's something that as a church we do need to be careful of, that we don't take advantage, right?
Yeah.
We remember that you do have a life as well. Just because you don't have kids and a husband, you have a life. Like,
I have a life.
And we can't just put all of the serving opportunities onto single people.
Yes. Don't take advantage, but also don't think that you can't ask respectfully.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And just if you want, like if you believe that God called you, this is kind of controversial. But if you desire marriage and family, there's nothing wrong with saying to your friends, hey, if you know somebody, feel free to pass on my number or talk to me about it first, like warn me. But like like introduce me to somebody, that's okay. Don't just, I think another misconception we have, again, controversial, but like that if we're just like that God is just going to automatically bring someone boom right into your life. Yeah. Right. You can sit around at home and wait for that. And I know women who, and probably men and men too, obviously, because I know both sides of the couple, but like that God has done that. And that's amazing. Like, but then there's nothing wrong with
absolutely
just living your life and meeting new people, being like, oh, hey, there's something happening over here. I'm going to go over there. Right. And just see what happens. Like live your life. If you want marriage and kids, there's nothing wrong with seeking it, but don't be desperate. Like, if that makes sense. Like,
yes.
Don't be desperate. That's not attractive to anyone. And your life is more than a spouse. So don't settle. Like, don't settle for anything less than God's best. If someone is not seeking after Christ, that is a no. Like, don't go there. You're going to cause yourself so much pain.
You're getting a lot of applause from Rachel Gilpin right now.
Okay. I got to go. But yeah, you're better off. I've said to a lot of people, I feel like I'm just rambling now, but I've said to a lot of people, I'd rather be single wishing I was married than married wishing I was single. Because, marriage is permanent.
Yeah, that's a very,
So don't.
Absolutely.
Don't let those things, don't let that become an idol in your life. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you got a ton of comments. People just really appreciating your honesty, your authenticity, and the ideas that you shared today. So thank you so much for coming on today and agreeing to have this conversation with me very publicly.
I like this format. I feel like
super important.
Yeah, I like this format because I feel like I'm just having a conversation with you.
Yeah, I
can't see everybody's comments.
It's just us and maybe some other people who might watch,
Yeah. So if you have more questions, and like if anybody who's watching has questions and wants to have an open conversation, like feel free to reach out to me. And ask those questions. I would love that to continue the conversation if needed / wanted. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. All right. So I will let you get to lunch.
Okay.
But yeah, seriously, thank you. Because I know that this will just help a lot of people feel heard. Like you said, you're not just speaking for yourself today, you're speaking for a group of people who don't often feel heard in the church. And so I know that this will help people feel seen and heard. And I really appreciate you being the spokesperson today for that. Thanks, Loran. So, all right, I will chat with you later. And thank you again for coming. Bye. And thank you all for joining in today. Tim will be back again next week, so join him for another exciting edition of Friday Fellowship Live. Same time, different place. He'll be in Milton, not in Northern Ontario. If you're in Ontario, you'll probably be in the same place, but that's okay. Hang in there. This is almost over. Have a great week, guys. Know that we're praying for you. And as always, if we can help in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. God bless.